Well, thank you so much to the organizers for putting this together, and all of you for coming out. It's awesome to be sharing this space with you all. And I just wanted to acknowledge the other speakers. You know, there's been a lot of things I've learned from Priscilla Settee as far as being an effector of change. And you know, Ryan Lear's been a yoga teacher of mine, and Cody Dills inspired me with his poetry. So there's a lot of great people you know, coming together in this room, and hopefully we can all come together a little bit more. So when I was asked about doing this talk, what's the theme? And the theme's play. So one thing a person learns as being an effector of change is how to answer tough questions. And there's an ABC formula that can work for that. And that's acknowledge the question, bridge to the message, and communicate the message. So you can be asked any question in the world, and you can use that formula, and it can work. So playing for life is what I titled this. It could be playing for the good life. It could be playing for our children's lives. It could be playing for the future. But essentially what it is it's a call to action for a more just and sustainable world. So this is it. This is our beautiful marble. This is our home that we're floating through the solar system, through the universe on, and this is what we have to work with to figure out how to make a good life together. Our lives are dependent upon this beautiful earth. But there's massive inequity that exists. And to help illustrate that, something that's been very powerful to me that I learned a lot about when I was at the University of Saskatchewan is this idea of Earth Fair Share. So basically what you do is you take all the ecologically productive land on the earth and you divide it up per person. And if you were to do that, we would end up with less than about 2 hectares per person, which is this line right here. But if you account for resource consumption by a population, you can do it as an individual or as a country, you can figure out how much land area would be needed to sustain that group's consumption. So as you can see, folks in Canada and the US are living way above their Earth Fair Share. They're living 3 to 4 times above their Earth Fair Share. Whereas folks in India, Bangladesh, Africa, they're living below their fair share. So it speaks to some of the inequity that exists on our beautiful planet. And a lot of it points back to capitalism, the economic system. It's a global economic system that is designed to increase monetary growth over time. And in a world with finite resources, this is impossible to sustain. The way that we value things like a barrel of oil has so many externalities to it that aren't factored into that cost that it makes this whole system irrelevant. It makes it nonsensical. It makes it stupid when it comes right down to it. And many are predicting serious economic depression and potentially even collapse if we don't start to have some radical changes. By the year 2050, if I was to make it that far and be, you know, an older guy, an author, Richard Heinberg, says we could be facing peak everything. So peak energy, so things like non-renewables, natural gas, oil, coal, uranium. And that affects the way that we grow food, the way we grow wheat, soy, corn. And all the petrochemicals and petrofertilizers we use for our agricultural systems are degrading our topsoil, polluting our fresh water. We've got a lot of work to do. We're over-harvesting our fisheries. It's not being done sustainably in our forests. Biodiversity is being impacted. So I guess this is to set a bit of the context for what we're dealing with here so we can get real, so that we can be made uncomfortable by it. But it's not to guilt us or to scare us. It's to motivate us and inspire us into taking action. And I guess something that really sensitized me to the state of the world was visiting the tar sands in 2007. It's one of the best examples of humanity going in the wrong direction. It's the largest industrial project on the face of the earth. And in 2007, I went there with a group of friends, and we actually biked through it and saw it from a ground level. So if you're not familiar with the tar sands, these are some statistics that will help you understand the impacts of them. To produce 1 barrel of tar sands oil requires enough energy that could heat 1.5 days' worth of home heating. producing 3 to 5 times the greenhouse gas emissions as conventional oil, using 4 tons of material because it's all buried in sand, and to get it out of the sand, you have to use fresh water. You have to steam it, swirl it, essentially separate the oil from the sand. And that creates about 1.5 barrels of toxic waste for every barrel of oil that's produced. And that toxic waste goes into tailings ponds like this one that can be seen from outer space with the naked eye. And those tailings ponds, they leak into freshwater bodies like the Athabasca River. And the Athabasca River flows to Fort Chipewyan. It flows north to Fort Chipewyan, and it's downstream communities like Fort Chipewyan that are facing epidemic rates of cancer and are being impacted by that. And we're also impacted by that in Saskatchewan because the emissions that come out of the tar sands are carried downwind, and we deal with acid rain here in northern Saskatchewan because of that. So big oil is really trying to lock down and build more oil addiction infrastructure while they still can, before we all become aware of what's happening. In 2005, this was the pipeline network that existed in North America extending from the tar sands. This is where they're trying to build it up to by 2030. The tar sands are this asterisk symbol in the middle there. And what you got is you got natural gas coming down from the territories to fuel the tar sands. And if that doesn't work, they want to put nuclear reactors around it to power it up, to be able to heat up the water, to steam the water and separate the oil from the sand. And then take that oil to the coast and put it on tankers the size of the Empire State Building and have over 200 tankers a year going out of that port. They also want to build pipelines like the Keystone XL pipeline to ship it down to the Gulf of Mexico, where we saw the BP oil disaster. And we don't have to be doing this at this point in time. Using tar sands oil is equivalent to scraping the bottom of the barrel. It's the dirtiest, most polluting form of oil that exists on the planet. And the only reason that we're thinking about developing it is because we're running out of oil. This is some of the work that I was involved with when I was in Alberta. I got involved with a group called Keepers of the Water, where we actually did water monitoring, community-based water monitoring. And this is me downstream of an actual refinery, a tar sands refinery, finding one of the many dead fish that I found in the river on that trip. And that was on the Athabasca River, and downstream on the Athabasca, there's Fort Chipewyan, and this is where the Keepers of the Water gathering was held, and it's non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal folks coming together to protect the water and to really protect what our lives are based on, water. It's not oil. As part of that, we planned actions, and this is an action I took part in of a group of young people. We quarantined the Premier's office and declared it a toxic waste site and delivered toxic water to his office. Another action I was part of is a legal action that revolved around a group of migratory birds landing on one of those tailings ponds, thinking that they could maybe have a break there from their migratory flight south, and becoming encoded with oil, and not one of the birds making it out. Not one of the birds making it out alive. And I was involved with a group called Eco Justice, and what we did is we put together a private prosecution of the company called Syncrude. They're one of the biggest operators in the tar sands. And they ended up being fined $3 million, which is, to date, the largest Canadian environmental protection fine in our history, in Canadian history. But I want to understand, what are we going to do? What's the alternative we're working towards here? So one of the best examples of a country that's already dealt with peak oil is Cuba. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 89-90, Cuba was really hit by it because the Soviet Union was Cuba's primary trading partner in basically an export economy. And when that period hit, they saw their oil imports and all their fossil fuel imports, which their cash crop system was dependent upon, totally decreased. And you saw The average Cuban losing 20 pounds during that time because they didn't have enough food to feed themselves. There was trade embargoes that Cuba was facing that also dealt with that. So you saw lawyers, doctors, engineers, very well-educated people going and making gardens, like this one right here that I'm posing in front of. Huge, massive gardens. Cuba, in Havana, Cuba, as a town, the city produces more than 60% of its own food within Havana. And it's absolutely amazing. And this is a beautiful model of what we need to be working towards. So after learning about Cuba, learning about what they're doing there, I came back to Saskatchewan to discover that here we were fighting a nuclear reactor. And that actually is the University of Saskatchewan, because the university is somewhat involved in the nuclear industry, as some folks may be aware. And the rally actually began here as a way to call out the university's involvement and say, you know what, we don't need to be doing this. We don't need to be involved in this toxic form of energy. There's more sustainable ways. And I want to learn here about food production. So I started learning about this thing, permaculture, this idea of growing systems, growing food systems. And this is at the 12th Street Community Garden. We're working on a food forest there. But how are we going to affect all this change? How are we going to do this? And one of the most exciting movements that I've been part of in the last while has been the popularized Occupy movement. And this is down at Occupy Saskatoon with an author named Raj Patel, who's wrote a lot of great books, one of which is The Value of Nothing. And so from my experience, I guess 3 strategies I think that we can all think about as far as moving forward. These are strategies that we need to be balancing when we're thinking about taking action, and from my experience have been really effective. And that's standing in solidarity with those being most impacted by economic, social, and environmental injustice, building and modeling the alternatives, the alternative solutions, especially things like housing, food, energy, the essentials of life, holding the decision makers who perpetuate the unsustainable and unjust systems accountable. And that means people who are powerful need to be held more accountable. People with more influence, more say, need to be held accountable. So here are some ideas that we can think about in Saskatchewan. Right now, there's a pipeline called the Keystone XL pipeline that's running through Saskatchewan. On the Canadian side, the pipeline's been approved, but on the American side, it's been stopped. It's been slowed down temporarily. And the reason it's been slowed down temporarily is because of direct action. People taking action, doing civil disobedience. This is an Indigenous Environmental Network campaigner in front of the White House, and she was one of 1,000 people, over 1,000 people, to get arrested in a 2-week campaign of civil disobedience to stop the approval of the Keystone XL pipeline. And even if that pipeline gets approved by the president or by the appropriate authorities in the U.S., people are saying, we have to occupy this route. We have to put our bodies on the line and make sure that this doesn't get built. This isn't in humanity's best interest. This is in the oil company's best interests. So when are we going to start taking action, fighting for our lives, playing for our lives, playing for our children's lives? In Saskatchewan, we also have tar sands. People might not be aware of this, but east of Fort McMurray and north of La Loche, we have our own deposit that a company called Oil Sands Quest has already started exploring in. And we have to be conscious about this or that happening in our province too. We can't let it happen here too. There's a better way. Another way that the Saskatchewan's north is being targeted is as a radioactive waste dump. And this is something we have to say no to. Groups like Clean Green Saskatchewan are helping lead the fight on this. And Saskatchewan has an amazing history of anti-nuclear resistance that has stopped processing plants, that stopped reactors, and we will stop this. We will stop this from happening here, but it's going to take all of us coming together. A group called the Committee for Future Generations has been involved with this. They're a group of Northerners that are coming together, that have came together from Pine House and English River First Nations to raise awareness to say, no, we don't want this. Last year they did a walk called the Walk for Future Generations. And they walked from Pine House to Regina, to the legislature, as a way to raise awareness about it. They walked 800 kilometers, took some time off to do this and raise awareness about this issue. And this is something that we need to support in our community. This is their stop in Saskatoon, and we need to be making our voices heard. So keep your ears to the ground for upcoming actions, because this summer it's going to get going again. So that was kind of the solidarity piece. As far as building the alternatives piece, something that we all can be taking part in little ways like, say, growing sprouts in your windowsill, or in large ways like digging up your lawn to grow food, is reclaiming our food system. We need to be reclaiming our food system. Eating local and saying no to big corporations that are trying to take over our food system, that are trying to own seeds, that are trying to control the production systems. Support your local farmers at the farmers market, but grow yourself. Grow yourself too. Whether that's growing sprouts in your windowsill, it can be as simple as that. You can become an alternative to this current system of agribusiness trying to take over. Not many folks know, but hopefully some here do, that 2012 is the International Year of the Cooperatives. And cooperatives are unique economic structures that are alternatives to corporations. They're set up around 7 principles that hold all cooperatives together. Open membership, democratic control. So that means one member, one vote. You don't vote based on shares as you do with a corporation. And concern for community are inherently built into them. And something that the Occupy movement has been calling for is for folks to take the pledge and move their money in 2012. And that means taking your money out of the big banks and putting it in the cooperative credit unions. There's a lot of great credit unions here in Saskatchewan, and there's websites on how to do that that can advise that. As far as education goes, there's a saying that goes, to each one, teach one. We need to be thinking about sharing our skills with each other, having more conversations like this, where we're learning from each other, where we're talking about issues, we're talking about justice. We need to be coming together with the people around us, whether it's student groups or our workplaces, our union groups, our faith groups, whatever it is, with people we trust, to be able to plan for the future. And in a world where, if you care about the environment, you can be called a radical by the government, by Prime Minister Harper. We might need to know a little bit about security culture, how to talk about these things in a way that's smart. So essentially where we're heading, if we want to be holding the primary decision makers accountable, is building people power, mass mobilizations. If we really want to play for our own lives, play for the lives of our children, play for the future, we need to be looking at mass mobilizations. And up there is the mass mobilization that really got the world's attention in Egypt. 1 million people. And then here on the Brooklyn Bridge in New York, this is the action that really brought Occupy Wall Street to world attention. And locally here, just a couple days ago, in Montreal, 200,000 people out in Montreal. So we need to be coming together, we need to take action, we need to be looking at mass mobilization, and I hope some of the strategies that I put out here will help you think about ways to play for our lives, play for life. Thanks for your time.